Hey, what's up guys, Merganman4 here, and Doctor Who Series 11 is finally here. It's been a long time, a long wait for Jodie Whittaker's 13th Doctor, and she's finally arrived, along with some new companions, a new showrunner, a new composer, and a whole new style, brand new everything. It's the beginning of a brand new era, and I gotta say, it's pretty exciting. So, The Woman Who Fell to Earth, the first episode of this brand new era. Now this has been an interesting episode for me because I've experienced one Doctor changeover before and two companion changeovers before. Now of course I have watched through all the eras of the show before, and so I've experienced, Doctor and companion changeovers that way, but I knew for the most part about all of the Doctors and companions, at least vaguely. So Peter Capaldi was the very first Doctor that I went into completely fresh, and Clara was the first companion that I experienced the same kind of way, where I watched their first episodes live with the rest of the world as the rest of the world was introduced to these characters, stuff like that. And I've never experienced a showrunner changeover like this before because I didn't start watching Doctor Who until Stephen Moffat's era had already begun. So this has been a very curious episode for me, especially because all of these things are happening at the same time. Previously, because Peter Capaldi is the only Doctor changeover I've experienced live, he didn't get a companion change then. So the companion changes and Doctor change I've experienced in the past have been distinct. So the change has really only been in one or two aspects at a time. But this time, it's all at once. And so that creates a very interesting kind of feel to it. So actually, the first time that I watched this episode, it didn't really feel like Doctor Who to me because everything was just so different. Now that's not automatically a bad thing. I definitely enjoyed the episode the first time through. I thought it was great, and I'm going to get into more specific details later, but yeah, I really enjoyed it and thought it was a pretty strong opener, actually. But it didn't feel like Doctor Who. It wasn't until I started to think about it a bit more and just consider it more in my head, and then I rewatched the episode that it actually started to feel like the show, which I'm pretty happy about because I usually takes me a bit to adjust to change, but this has actually happened pretty quickly. I didn't really expect to get used to it this fast, but after having seen the first episode 2 times, it already feels, like Doctor Who, which is just excellent. But yeah, obviously it hasn't been around long enough for me to say necessarily how it compares to previous eras. I'm not prepared to say that yet because we are only one episode in. All I am prepared to say is that I am liking the new style and where it's going. The new series looked gorgeous. I will say, this episode in particular, I didn't feel like there was too much of a visual upgrade over previous seasons. Like, it definitely had a different kind of feel to it, but it wasn't really too noticeable to me, but there were definitely some parts of the trailer that felt very different to me, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see until later episodes for, a stronger effect of that. And the music is probably one of the other most notable changes because Murray Gold has been composing for the show ever since it came back. He's done 10 full seasons, and so this was the very first episode of New Who to not be scored by Murray Gold. And it's definitely a lot more of a subtle score. I've been listening to the music on YouTube, and I definitely quite like it. I like Segun Akinola's style, and once again, I'm not ready to say whether it's an improvement or not, because I still found Murray Gold's stuff really, really good, but I can definitely say that I like it. I like it a lot. There were a couple of standout tracks for me. The one where 13 is building her sonic screwdriver another one when Tim Shaw is climbing up the crane.
Come on, Peter! Turn around, please! Go on!
Hey! Car! From the train! Up and over! Up and over!
We've got to be kidding!
And when 13 gets her I'm the Doctor moment.
Bit of adrenaline, dash of outrage, and a hint of panic knitted my brain back together. I know exactly who I am. I'm the Doctor. Sorting out fair play throughout the universe.
Stuff like that. And how can I talk about the music without mentioning the new theme? Now, we didn't get a title sequence this episode, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I'm not entirely sure why they cut it. I've seen speculation online that it's because they wanted to get every single minute they could out of the episode, which is fair, but at the same time, to me it just feels wrong to not have the title sequence in it because it's such an iconic part of the show. And if you can have end credits, I mean, I'm assuming end credits is like an obligation, like an actual, you have to have these, which makes sense because you gotta credit these people for their work. But the opening credits are such an iconic piece of the show, and it just feels wrong to not have them there. And you can tell where they're supposed to be, because after 13 crash lands into the train, you hear a little bit of the theme, and you can tell that's where the original titles were supposed to go. So it's a bit of a shame that we don't get to see them until next week. But we do get a glimpse in the end credits as well. It really is a modernized version of the 60s, which is a good pairing with the new theme, which I'll get to in a second. Because it definitely looks like a modernized howl-around effect, which was the effect that was used to create the first 3 title sequences of the show. Now, how much of this howl-around effect that we see is featured in the actual title sequence remains to be seen. I am curious whether the crystals will end up in the title sequence in some form, because that's kind of been pretty heavy in the marketing. We see it in the logo reveal, in a couple of the behind-the-scenes features released for this episode. We see it in the new Big Finish covers with the new logo. You can see the crystals on the top and bottom of the frame of the image. So I don't know if that's actually going to tie into the title sequence at all. But definitely, based off of the end credits, the howl-around bit is going to play some sort of role in it, because the end credits are always in some form related to the opening credits in style. But now, let's talk about the theme, which is like the actual visuals, a modernized version of the original 1963 theme. The first time I heard it, I wasn't too sure about it. I knew I liked it, but I was kind of iffy about how it sounded. I thought the drums were a bit too strong, and perhaps it was a bit too similar to the 63 version for my liking, which, don't get me wrong, I really love that theme, but I thought maybe it would have been good if it was a little bit more different, because Murray Gould did a similar kind of thing in 2005. He took the original theme as a base, and then he built a brand new theme out of that and used all sorts of different orchestral elements to build over top of that theme and create a modernized version of it. And that still remains one of my favorite versions of the theme in the show. But as I've listened to this new theme more, I've grown to appreciate it more as well. And actually, I've grown to really like the strong drums. And especially, there's a part of the theme that just sounds really, I guess, maybe not creepy, but haunting. That's the word I'm looking for, haunting. That I just love. And the more I listen to it, the more I like this version of the theme. I am not prepared to say that it's my favorite version. That still remains the 1980s Howl version. But I think it's a definite improvement on any of the themes we had during the Moffat era. I think I do like it more than any of the Moffat era themes, which is definitely good. And now, enough about that. I want to talk about our new Doctor. If you've seen some of my other videos, I have expressed some doubt about this casting. Nothing against Jodie Whittaker. I had no idea about, her skills as an actress, but I trusted that she would be a very good actress and up to the task. My concerns were more in the writing department. Now, we still have 9 more episodes to go, so it does remain to be seen how this is handled. But if this episode is anything to go by, this is exactly how I'd want a female Doctor to be handled. Her gender, I think, is really only mentioned one time, and it's done as a joke. It was a funny joke, and they just moved on from it and never really mentioned it again. which is just what I want to see. I don't want to see her gender overtaking, the plot or the theme of the episode or the message if it's, not really relevant at all. So this is great. A great way of handling her. And not only that, Jodie Whittaker did a phenomenal job in this episode. And I have to admit, Peter Capaldi, he is one of my favorite Doctors. I think Capaldi himself is my favorite actor to have played the role. His actual characterization of a Doctor Number 12 is a little bit inconsistent, and there are parts of him that I was not a huge fan of. Sonic sunglasses and guitar, stuff like that. But I really enjoyed his Doctor overall, but in Deep Breath, it took me a while to get used to him as the Doctor. And actually, until about halfway through the episode, I was pretty uncertain. I was like, he just doesn't feel like the Doctor to me. And it wasn't until he went to rescue Clara that I started to feel like, okay, he definitely is the Doctor. With Jodie Whittaker, I'll admit, it was pretty much instantaneous, which was really surprising to me, pleasantly surprising, and all throughout, she just did a fantastic job, and I never once doubted that she was the Doctor. So, bravo to her, and bravo to Chibnall, because they've done a really, really good job in making 13 just feel like the Doctor right off the bat. So, I'm pretty pleased with the results for that, and I'm sure that it's going to continue in that same kind of direction for the rest of this series. I really hope it does, because I really enjoyed her. Now, if I were to have a complaint, it's that her performance is very reminiscent of Matt Smith and a little bit of David Tennant, and that's definitely not a bad thing in and of itself. I mean, Tennant is my favorite Doctor, but I do feel like this is maybe a little too soon to have that kind of Doctor again. It's because of my personal preferences. One of the reasons I really liked Capaldi so much is because he was such a stark contrast from the past couple of Doctors. So to me, I don't know, I prefer shaking it up a bit more instead of just having the same kind of Doctors again and again and again. I'd rather wait a couple more regenerations before we have a more goofy Doctor like Matt Smith, and now it seems Jodie Whittaker's Doctor is following in that kind of path, which again, in and of itself isn't an issue. It's just, I feel like it's too soon after we had that kind of Doctor to be going down that route again. But I'm sure as the series goes on, we'll start to see other elements of it and see Jodie Whittaker putting her own spin on her incarnation. We'll just have to wait and see. But I hope that she doesn't end up feeling too similar to Smith and Tennant. Otherwise, I feel like it's just too soon for that kind of incarnation again. Another thing I really liked from this episode is how she built her own sonic screwdriver. Now, here's the thing. I don't really like the design of the sonic screwdriver. It's not necessarily terrible, but I've always preferred the more technological looking ones, and personally it is my least favorite design of the screwdriver, but I really like the context of how it came to be in the story. I felt like her losing her screwdriver after the fall felt a bit more natural than having to destroy some of the other screwdrivers to change the screwdriver, and I also really like that she built it herself, unlike previous ones where the TARDIS just gave it to him. That just felt like it was too quick and easy. This just makes it feel more believable and genuine, I guess. And the montage itself was a lot of fun, and I thought it was great that she used her wits and her intelligence and what she had around to build up a brand new sonic screwdriver. And I just really like the resourcefulness that we also see later in the episode of her building the TARDIS tracker out of that Senza transportation pod. Now, we didn't just get a new Doctor in this episode, we also got some new companions, and for the first time since the 1980s, we've got 3 companions at once. And actually, this episode effectively had 4 companions, which is just ridiculous. That's a lot of main characters to balance. And it's a really good thing that this episode was a little bit longer so that it could do that. But our 3 main companions that we're going to have throughout the series are Yasmin, Ryan, and Graham. Personally, I feel like we haven't had enough time with any of them yet for them to leave an impression on me. Ryan was definitely served the best. I thought it was a really interesting subplot for him to have this dyspraxia, which affects coordination, and it's just a nice little character detail, and it also ends up setting the whole plot in motion. But I do think that each of these characters got a good introduction. I wouldn't say necessarily great. These characters definitely need more time to be fleshed out. But interestingly, our fourth so-called companion is Grace, who is Graham's wife. And she ends up dying at the end of the episode, which I didn't expect, because I'm fairly certain Chibnall said she was going to be a recurring character. So I didn't expect that whatsoever, and I thought her death was really poignant. And not only that, her character, aside from maybe the Doctor, was my favorite character in the episode, which made it more sad when she died. I loved, her compassion and her desire to help, and she's immediately ready to jump into the action and do something about the situation. One of my favorite parts of the episode is when she says to Graham, is it wrong that I'm enjoying this? And he says yes, and then she just walks off laughing. It's a really sweet moment. And well, here's the thing, I should have seen the death coming, because the whole time I was thinking, she is like the perfect role for a companion. Why doesn't she join them for the rest of the series? And that's why, because she dies. And it was a genuinely sad death, and it was a really good twist on the title of The Woman Who Fell to Earth, because of course we all assume it's the Doctor, and also of Ryan's vlog at the beginning and end of the episode, because at first you think he's talking about the Doctor, but it's actually about his grandmother, which is really, really nice. And yeah, she was a great character. But anyway, back to the companions. Again, we don't really have enough about them yet, I feel, to fully judge them, and I'm really excited to explore them a bit more in the later episodes. I do find it really interesting how Graham he just doesn't believe in the aliens whatsoever, and he's kind of like in a role of anti-companion, because you've got Grace on the one hand, who just seems like the perfect fit for it, and Graham, who's like kind of extra cautious, doesn't believe in aliens, he just wants to, get the situation done and over with, but then he's the one who ends up going on the adventures with the Doctor. Of course, in the end of the episode, it's not by choice, it's an accident, but I think that dynamic is going to be really interesting to explore, actually, between all of them, because they're traveling with the Doctor not by choice, at least not yet, because the TARDIS isn't found yet. And that's another aspect of the episode I want to talk about. No TARDIS. A lot of people I've seen complain about this and be like, what? How can there not be the TARDIS? There have been a lot of episodes in the past, actually, that didn't feature the TARDIS, so it's not the end of the world when you don't have the TARDIS. It's been done plenty of times before. What is interesting is that this has been promoted as a jumping on point, and I think it does work overall pretty well as a jumping on point, but the lack of the TARDIS is very curious, because it's such a vital and iconic part of the show, and to not have that in someone's introductory episode, that just feels really strange, honestly. Going into the episode, I kind of expected us to see the TARDIS at the very end. Obviously that didn't turn out to be true. I do fully expect to see it next episode, though. A lot of people have been saying, oh, well, what if it's the series arc that they're going to have to find the TARDIS? But a couple things. One, it's been shown in all sorts of promotional images. Two, we got the leaked image of the TARDIS set. Three, the reason they get to the planet that they're at in the next episode is because the Doctor set up a device to track where her TARDIS is, and it's teleported them there, so her TARDIS has got to be there. Unless it's sent her to the wrong place, but then how do they get to other places? And I think it would be too convoluted and awkward to introduce another method of time-space travel before the TARDIS if you're supposed to be introducing the show to new viewers. So I am fairly confident that the TARDIS is going to appear in the next episode. But I didn't really find the lack of TARDIS in this episode jarring at all, but I am excited to see how the companions react to the TARDIS. And I was a little bit surprised, because 13 mentioned the TARDIS a few times, and none of them really responded to it. None of them were like, what's a TARDIS? which I thought was a little bit weird, but otherwise, yeah, its absence from the episode it felt perfectly fine. Next, I want to talk about the villain. This was a very interesting case for me because so Chris Chibnall has been trying to keep things as spoiler-free as possible, which is great because it allows for such a fresh viewing experience. I cannot remember the last time that I had no idea about what the rest of the season might hold when the season began. We still haven't got the episode titles yet for the rest of the season. We still only know officially the first 2 episode titles and unofficially one other title from the season. But that leaves 7 other episodes completely unknown. And I only know little bits and pieces from some other episodes, but I don't even know if I could pinpoint them to certain episodes, which has never happened before with the season that I can remember anyway. But what was especially interesting was I didn't even have a clue what the villain/monster would be in this episode. I had absolutely no idea. Because every other time, they release a synopsis that mentions it, or there'd be promotional pictures of the monster, or you'd see it in the trailer, and you would have some sort of idea. But going into this, I had zero clue. And I don't think I've ever experienced that before with a new Doctor Who episode. And it was such a great feeling. Because the whole time, I had no idea what was going on. I was seeing these things. The pod, I had no idea what it was. When the pod cracked open and you see this humanoid in armor, I had no idea what it was. It was a complete surprise to me. And it was so great to have that feeling. The feeling of not knowing and learning these things as they play out. And I'm so happy to have that. So I thank you, Chibnall. And I can't wait until later episodes in the season when I can also be, when the episodes also feel so fresh because I don't know anything about them. Now, about the villain itself, it's an interesting concept. You've got this alien that is hunting a randomly designated human. He takes people's teeth after he kills them and sticks them on his face to show his conquests, which was a little bit gruesome. It sounds kind of funny on paper, but like when you actually look at him, he genuinely looks kind of freaky. I'll admit the villain doesn't have a ton of depth to him, but I thought he was serviceable, and really, it's not about the villain. It's about 13 and her coming to know who she is and learning about our new companions as well. And in that regard, I think the episode really succeeded, and the villain played the role that it was meant to play. Didn't really do more, and it didn't do less. And I thought that Tim Shaw, as 13 kept calling him, he was a pretty decent villain. And again, actually, that feeling of not knowing actually helped with the freakiness of it, because I didn't know what was coming whatsoever. I didn't expect there to be teeth all over his face or anything like that, which was really interesting. You've also got the little gathering coil that collected information, half organic, half machine. It didn't really do too much, but it was an interesting thing to appear earlier in the episode to get the characters into the plot and end up going after Tim Shaw. And kind of like the villain, the plot itself, it's pretty serviceable. What really makes the episode is the characters. The one real thing that bugs me a little bit about the plot is that we get zero explanation as to how 13 survived the fall. You could easily just say, well, she's just after regenerating, so she can instantly heal, but I think that's a bit of a lame reason. Like, it wasn't even really acknowledged again, which it should have at least been acknowledged. At least mentioned, like, that she was still regenerating, so she was able to survive. But it wasn't even mentioned. So I thought that bugged me a little bit. And it didn't have any lasting consequences either. So for all intents and purposes, there was no reason to have her falling like that. The only real reason for Twice Upon a Time to have ended like that was to get the TARDIS to disappear, but you didn't need her falling out to do that. So, seemed like a little bit of a pointless thing, just an excuse to get a cliffhanger, which I'm not a huge fan of cliffhangers for the sake of cliffhangers. If it's a cliffhanger that advances the plot, then that's good, but this plot point didn't really go anywhere. Oh, and before I forget, another thing I want to mention is I really like the Doctor picking out her outfit scene. I missed that with Peter Capaldi, because his Doctor, we didn't get to see him choose his outfit, which I think is only the second, well, technically third time, because we didn't see one choose his outfit, and we also didn't see two choose his outfit because he regenerated with new clothes. But other than that, other than those three, we've seen every other Doctor choose their outfit, so I was really hoping we got a choose outfit scene for 13, and we did. While I may not be the biggest fan of the outfit, I do think it's starting to grow on me, maybe a little bit, but not a ton. It's still, I mean, yeah, it's definitely still one of my least favorite Doctor outfits. And I do think that Jodie Whittaker looked fantastic in Peter Capaldi's outfit, I'm going to be honest. It was great seeing her throughout the episode in his outfit. And it was good to be able to see her picking out her clothes, and I liked Yaz's comment that that's what you're going with. That kind of matched my feelings, but then 13 just unashamedly says, yes I am. And if I'm honest, that does feel totally like the Doctor. I mean, this is the person who wore an entirely rainbow ensemble for an entire incarnation, so why not this? One final thing that I found really interesting about this episode is that it's got a lot of parallels with the 1960s and how the show originally started. You've got a grandparent-grandchild relationship with Graham and Ryan, but unlike with the First Doctor and Susan, their relationship is filled with a bit more tension because Graham is his step-grandfather, and he's only been in Ryan's life for a couple of years by this point. You've got, obviously, the new theme and title sequence, which are absolutely obvious homages to the 60s. You've got the three companions, which is, again, the same kind of structure, as well as two males, two females. And finally, this isn't specific to this episode, but this series has been stated to be going back to those educational roots in some points of the 60s episodes. So I find it really interesting how Chibnall is trying to start off his era as essentially a modernized version of the 60s. And actually, another thing that I forgot to mention is that the companions don't choose to go with the Doctor. It happens against their will. Now, in this case, the Doctor didn't purposefully take them with her, but the point still stands, they didn't choose to come with her. And it ended on a classic cliffhanger of going into the next episode, which is also very 60s, which was nice to see. We had a few of those in Series 10, but otherwise we don't really get those too often. But it was definitely something that the 60s did for a lot of its stories. So overall, what did I think of The Woman Who Fell to Earth? I really liked it. I thought it was an excellent debut for Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, and I like the new companions so far. The character work has been pretty strong. I like the villain. I didn't love him, but I liked him. The music is pretty great. The visual style is good. And I gotta say, it was quite the strong opener, and I'm very excited for the rest of the season now. Most of my concerns, I'm not really feeling them anymore. This opener has kind of taken those concerns away from me. So long as the rest of the series can keep it up, I say we're in for a pretty good series. And I think I'm going to give The Woman Who Fell to Earth an 8 out of 10. Now, something you may be wondering is, where does this place in regards to other Doctor debuts and series premieres? In terms of Doctor debuts, I'm going to try to refer to both the classic series and the new series here. It falls in about the middle, actually. Even though I gave it an 8, there are a decent amount of Doctor debuts that I really like. There's only 3 that I would say that I don't like, all from the classic series. But I would put it above all the classic series debuts except for The Power of the Daleks and Spearhead from Space, which are 2 and 3's debuts. And if we're just talking about the first episode of An Unearthly Child because it's so different from the rest of the story, then I would probably put that above The Woman Who Fell to Earth as well. But if we're talking about the story as a whole, I'd put it below. And then of the new series, I would say that I liked it more than Rose and the Christmas Invasion, which were 9 and 10's debuts, but not quite as much as the 11th Hour or Deep Breath, which were 11 and 12's debuts. So overall, depending on whether we count An Unearthly Child as an individual episode or a full story, The Woman Who Fell to Earth goes about 5th or 6th out of 13 Doctor debuts for me. I'm also going to put a list of series premieres. I'm not going to include Classic Who for this because that's just so many. Let's just stick with 11 premieres for now. And as far as premieres go, I'd say it does pretty strongly. I'd rank it above every RTD premiere and maybe half of Moffat's premieres. I would still say, well, I've already said The 11th Hour and Deep Breath are better than it. I would also say that The Impossible Astronaut is better. So actually, out of 11 new series premieres, it lands in 4th place, which is pretty good. And good on you, Chibnall, because I have not been the biggest fan of your episodes in the past. This still isn't my favorite Chibnall story. I think The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood is ever so slightly better. But this is pretty close, and it definitely gives me hope that Chibnall will continue to make some pretty good stories, and hopefully he'll reach some of Moffat's heights at some point, because Moffat gave us some pretty good episodes, and hopefully Chibnall doesn't reach Moffat's lows, because Moffat also gave us some pretty low lows. But it gives me some confidence in Chibnall and his show running, and now his new era, as well as 13's, and yeah, it's a good start, and I'm very excited for what comes next. So that's it for my thoughts and opinions on The Woman Who Fell to Earth. Please put your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next week with the Ghost Monument.